The year is 1770. Boston, a bustling port city on the edge of a vast wilderness, crackles with tension. The streets, usually alive with the sounds of commerce and community, are now patrolled by British soldiers, their presence a constant reminder of the growing rift between Great Britain and her American colonies. The air is thick with resentment, fear, and the growing realization that the ties that bind are fraying, perhaps beyond repair. The seeds of revolution, sown in the fertile ground of discontent, are beginning to sprout. The colonists, long accustomed to a degree of self-governance, chafe under increasingly restrictive laws and taxes imposed from afar by a parliament thousands of miles across the Atlantic. Each new act of parliament, perceived as an infringement upon their liberties, fuels the flames of resistance. The British, for their part, view the colonists as ungrateful subjects, unwilling to shoulder their fair share of the empire's burdens. They see the growing unrest as the work of agitators and troublemakers, ignoring the very real grievances that underpin the colonial outcry. The stage is set for a confrontation, a clash that will have profound consequences for both sides of the Atlantic. This is the story of the Boston Massacre, a pivotal event that would transform a simmering rebellion into a full-blown revolution. It is a story of anger and fear, of propaganda and protest, of courage and sacrifice. It is a story that reminds us that the fight for freedom is often long and difficult, paved with both triumph and tragedy. The presence of British troops in Boston was a constant source of friction, a visible symbol of British authority in a city yearning for autonomy. Sent to enforce order and ensure compliance with unpopular laws, the soldiers were viewed by many colonists as an occupying force, their red coats a stark reminder of their unwelcome presence. The economic hardships faced by many Bostonians further exacerbated tensions. The British government's mercantilist policies, designed to enrich the mother country at the expense of the colonies, had led to widespread unemployment and economic uncertainty. The imposition of the Stamp Act in 1765, followed by the Townshend Acts in 1767, only served to deepen the resentment felt towards the Crown. Adding fuel to the fire were the actions of individuals like Samuel Adams, a skilled propagandist and fiery orator who recognized the power of public opinion. Adams, along with other Sons of Liberty, skillfully exploited the growing discontent, organizing protests, disseminating pamphlets, and delivering impassioned speeches that denounced British tyranny and called for colonial unity. By 1770, Boston was a powder keg, primed to explode. The relationship between the colonists and the British soldiers had deteriorated to the point where even the smallest spark could ignite a conflagration. Tragically, that spark would come on a cold March night, forever etching the date of March 5, 1770, into the annals of American history. The evening of March 5, 1770, began like many others in Boston. A cold wind whipped through the streets, carrying with it the scent of salt air and the promise of snow. As darkness descended, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, the city's inhabitants retreated indoors, seeking refuge from the biting cold. However, on this particular night, a sense of unease hung in the air. The tension that had been building for months, fueled by resentment, fear, and a growing sense of injustice, was palpable. On King Street near the Custom House, a group of British soldiers stood guard, their muskets glinting in the dim light of the street lamps. A lone British sentry, Private Hugh White, paced back and forth in front of the Custom House, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. As he walked, he noticed a group of colonists gathering nearby, their voices growing louder and more agitated by the moment. The colonists, a mix of laborers, apprentices and sailors, had gathered to voice their anger over the recent death of an 11-year-old boy, Christopher Sider, who had been shot and killed by a customs official just days earlier. As their numbers swelled, so too did their boldness, their shouts and jeers directed at the solitary soldier. Sensing trouble, Private White raised his musket and shouted at the crowd to disperse. His words, however, were met with defiance. The colonists, emboldened by their numbers and fueled by anger, refused to back down. Some began to pelt him with snowballs, chunks of ice, and oyster shells. The situation escalated rapidly. Hearing the commotion, Captain Thomas Preston, the officer of the watch, arrived on the scene with a small detachment of soldiers. They pushed their way through the crowd, forming a semicircle around Private White, their bayonets fixed. What happened next is a matter of much debate. Some witnesses claimed that Captain Preston ordered his men to fire, while others maintained that the soldiers, surrounded by a hostile crowd, panicked and fired without orders. Regardless of who gave the order, the result was chaos. A volley of musket fire ripped through the crowd, followed by several more shots. When the smoke cleared, 5 colonists lay dead or dying on the blood-soaked cobblestones, including Crispus Attucks, a former slave who became a symbol of colonial resistance. The crowd, momentarily stunned into silence, erupted in horror and outrage. Some fled in terror while others rushed to the aid of the fallen. The British soldiers, their faces pale with shock and fear, retreated to the custom house, their muskets still smoking. The aftermath of the Boston Massacre was immediate and profound. The city, already on edge, teetered on the brink of anarchy. The sight of colonial blood staining the cobblestones, a stark reminder of British brutality, ignited a firestorm of outrage that spread like wildfire throughout the colonies and across the Atlantic. Under pressure to restore order and appease the public, Governor Thomas Hutchinson ordered the arrest of Captain Preston and his soldiers. They were charged with murder and imprisoned, awaiting trial. The trial, which began in October of 1770, was a media sensation, captivating the attention of colonists and Britons alike. The prosecution, led by Robert Treat Paine, argued that the soldiers had acted with malice and premeditation, firing upon unarmed civilians without provocation. The defense, led by the brilliant young lawyer John Adams, argued that the soldiers had acted in self-defense, firing only after being provoked and attacked by a hostile mob. Adams, a staunch advocate for colonial rights, surprised many by agreeing to defend the soldiers, believing that everyone, even those accused of heinous crimes, deserved a fair trial. The trial concluded with the acquittal of Captain Preston and 6 of his soldiers. 2 soldiers, Private Hugh Montgomery and Private Matthew Kilroy, were found guilty of manslaughter and branded on their thumbs. The verdict, while controversial, reflected the jury's belief that the soldiers had been provoked and that the shootings, while tragic, were not premeditated murder. Section 6. The Propaganda Machine, Paul Revere and the Power of Images. The Boston Massacre, while tragic, provided a golden opportunity for those seeking to fan the flames of revolution. Samuel Adams, ever the master propagandist, recognized the power of the event to galvanize colonial opinion against British rule. Adams, along with other Sons of Liberty, wasted no time in shaping the narrative of the event. They dubbed it a massacre, a deliberate and unprovoked attack on innocent civilians by bloodthirsty British soldiers. They circulated eyewitness accounts, many of them embellished or outright fabricated, that painted the colonists as victims and the soldiers as aggressors. However, it was Paul Revere's now iconic engraving of the event that proved to be the most effective piece of propaganda. Revere, a silversmith and engraver by trade, completed his engraving just 3 weeks after the massacre. His depiction of the event, while not entirely accurate, captured the public's imagination and cemented the image of British tyranny in the minds of many colonists. Revere's engraving, widely distributed throughout the colonies, became a rallying cry for resistance. It adorned newspapers, pamphlets, and broadsides, its powerful imagery serving as a constant reminder of British aggression and the sacrifices made by those who dared to stand up to tyranny. Section 7. A Nation Awakened, the Massacre's Impact on Colonial Unity. The Boston Massacre had a profound impact on colonial unity. Prior to the event, the colonies, while united in their opposition to British policies, were far from a cohesive entity. The massacre, however, served as a catalyst, bringing the colonies together in a shared sense of grief, outrage, and determination. The event became a rallying point for colonial resistance, a symbol of British oppression, and the need for unity in the face of tyranny. The Committees of Correspondence, established by Samuel Adams in 1772, used the memory of the massacre to foster communication and cooperation between the colonies. The annual commemorations of the Boston Massacre, held each year on March 5th, served as a powerful reminder of the sacrifices made by those who had fallen on King Street. These commemorations, featuring speeches, sermons, and reenactments of the event, helped to keep the spirit of resistance alive and to solidify the growing sense of colonial identity. The Boston Massacre, while tragic, had awakened a sleeping giant. The colonies, once divided by regional differences and competing interests, were now united by a common enemy and a shared desire for liberty. Section 8. The Legacy of the Boston Massacre, a turning point towards independence. The Boston Massacre was a pivotal event in the lead-up to the American Revolution. It marked a turning point in the relationship between Great Britain and her American colonies, a point of no return from which there would be no turning back. The event shattered any illusions of reconciliation between the colonies and the mother country. The image of British soldiers firing upon unarmed colonists, seared into the minds of Americans by Paul Revere's engraving, became a powerful symbol of British tyranny and the need for independence. The massacre, combined with the ongoing economic grievances and the inflammatory rhetoric of colonial leaders like Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry, created an atmosphere of distrust and animosity that made war all but inevitable. The shots fired on King Street that cold March night may not have been the first shots of the American Revolution, but they were the shots that echoed loudest in the hearts and minds of the colonists, steeling their resolve and setting in motion a chain of events that would culminate in the birth of a new nation. Section 9. Conclusion: Remembering the past, shaping the future. The Boston Massacre stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of freedom and the importance of vigilance in defending it. It teaches us that the path to liberty is often fraught with peril, marked by both triumph and tragedy. As we reflect on the events of that fateful night in 1770, let us remember the sacrifices made by those who came before us, those who dared to raise their voices against injustice and to fight for a better future. Let us honor their memory by cherishing the freedoms they fought so hard to secure, and by remaining ever vigilant in defending those freedoms against all threats, both foreign and domestic. For the legacy of the Boston Massacre is not simply a tale of the past, but a timeless reminder that the fight for liberty is an ongoing struggle, one that requires constant vigilance, unwavering courage, and an unyielding commitment to the ideals of justice, equality, and self-determination.